Behind me is my 2002 Lamborghini Murcielago. We've got a lot of cars here in the shop, and this was my very first car that I bought in the last, say 5 to 10 years. That was anything more than a daily driver. I started looking for this car about 18 months or 2 years before I actually bought it. My kids were much younger, and we used to joke that all I did was look at Lamborghinis on eBay and on on all these sites. And what I was doing was searching for what I thought the perfect Lamborghini was. And I thought initially that that was a Diablo until I saw the prices going up and up and up. And then I thought, you know what? What's after that? Because the depreciation curve seems to roll with these cars. So I checked out the next generation, which is the Murcielago, and got an eye for them. Actually started to appreciate what they were beyond just a Lamborghini. And if we dial back a little bit, the reason I wanted the Lamborghini at all was because I'm a kid of the 80s. And in the 80s, you had, at least I had, two movies that tweaked me on Lamborghinis. One, which is probably the most obvious, was Cannonball Run. And it and its sequel both featured Lamborghinis. And the first 4 minutes of that movie I've watched literally 50 times. It's got a black Countach being chased by, of all things, a police Trans Am, which is cool in its own right. But watching it to this day, one, it's funny because it's all sped up and it's weird to watch because of the filming. But you still get in that first scene that this Countach is just rolling over the desert, and it's like the sun's coming up, and it's a great shot of a Lamborghini. That was like my first introduction. Obviously, there were posters thereafter. And then the next movie, of all things, was the movie Rain Man. And the initial shot of that also features a Lamborghini. And that's of a Lamborghini literally floating in space. And the first X minutes are like, why is that car floating in space? Come to find out they're being imported, and there's a whole story behind it. But the point is, in the first 5 minutes of that movie, you see 4 or 5 Lamborghinis on the dock, and they're just like the most beautiful cars. So that brings us to this yellow Murcielago behind me. Again, I was searching through eBay, kids poking fun at me, and one night I was laying in bed just looking again on my phone through eBay listings, and this car popped up. And immediately I knew that it was the car, and what sold it to me was the wing. And so again, kid of the 80s, big wings on Countaches are cool, so big wings on anything are cool. So the wing is what sold me, even though this is not an SV, and what this car has is an SV body kit, but the look of the car itself is what sold me. So again, looking through my phone, find the car, oh shit, that's the car, and immediately book a plane ticket to Dallas, which is where it was at. This was at Lamborghini Dallas. I wanted to use a dealership to get a car because they had some expertise behind them. They would fix all the usual problems that happen with these cars, and they have financing options available if you need them. It was the experience that I was looking for, and I recommend it. So I flew down to Dallas, called the dealership on the way and said, hey, that yellow one with the wing, hold that one, I will be there in 5 hours. And showed up in the afternoon. And what's funny is, show up, completely jet lagged because I was up all night thinking about this car, but get there, meet the sales guy, check the car out, and do a test drive. And again, the test drive was both my first time physically inside a Lamborghini and my first time driving one. And this is now is at call it 4 p.m. Dallas time, and rush hour is just beginning to happen. And I'm in this Lamborghini trying to work my way out onto the service drive, and then get on the freeway and do all of a 10-minute random in traffic test drive of this Lamborghini to come back and and say I wanted to actually get it. Now obviously before I even drove it, it was one of those things where it's like the test drive would have to go horribly wrong for me to go, wow, this car sucks, I don't want it. So long story short, decide to buy the car, commit to buy the car, go back to the airport, fly back home, and then I get to wait for the car to be delivered. And that took a few weeks. They had a couple things to fix on the car, and they did so, and then it was a January evening when I took delivery in Michigan here for the car. And if you know Michigan, in January, it's hilariously cold. So we had my wife, my 2 kids, and myself in a Home Depot parking lot waiting for this car to be unloaded. And it was, and then I packed 2 kids in the passenger seat and drove them the 1.5 miles back to my house. And it was a funny drive nonetheless. And of course, pulling into my neighborhood, My neighbor is behind me wondering what the hell is this Lamborghini doing pulling into my neighborhood. And I do live on a dirt road, by the way. So I'm on this dirt road that's frozen in January in Michigan, putting this Lamborghini into my 2-car garage. So onto the car's details a little bit. I did not know a ton about Murcielagos before purchasing beyond some basic facts. And to be honest, I am not a Murcielago guru by any stretch of the imagination. This, again, is an 02, and they started making them in 01, and I believe 02 was the first model year. This is car number 66, as I understand it. It is a 6-speed gated manual, and that was one of the few things that I had beyond a crazy wing that I wanted in a Murcielago. And if you know much about these cars, you know that the later generations brought fewer and fewer manuals. And so the first, I think it's 02 and 03, and it may just be 02, has just manuals. So looking for an older Murcielago, a generation 1, yields you more manuals. The car is a 6.2 liter V12, and that was the other thing, of course, that draws folks to Lamborghinis is the V12 motor. It sounds good, it looks good, it's a work of art, it's all those things. That made it to a gated manual shifter was kind of like the perfect car for me at that era. And it's a rear mount motor, obviously, so you've got mid-engine, which gives a hilarious driving experience for those who haven't driven one or ridden in one, of the motor being right behind your head, and hearing the V12 behind you, it's a really cool feeling. When I was looking for a Murcielago, I had 3 or 4 just must-have features, and some of them I didn't know went hand in hand, so I wanted to have a gated 6-speed manual. And that was tougher than I thought it was going to be, but the Gen 1 Murcielagos, which is 02, 03, maybe even 04-ish, right? That they were weighted towards the gated manuals. 02, I think all there were gated manuals. I wanted a V12. I wanted scissor doors, which of course you can't get a V12 and not get scissor doors, and vice versa. And I wanted the goofy big wing, even if it's not an SV. And so when this one popped up, it checked all the boxes and made sense to try and get this one in particular. So like any car, I like to pick out the things I find funny or odd about them, and this is no different. This car's got more than a few funny bits. Also just some cool facts along the way. So the car is built largely of carbon fiber, and again, for 2002, that was a big deal, right? Not all cars were carbon fiber. That added to the cost of this car, which had a 200 plus, I think, price tag originally. The only thing not carbon fiber on the car are the doors. They're aluminum, and the roof, I believe, is steel. Beyond that, everything on here is carbon fiber. And it's interesting, and if you get close enough and look at even the gas fill cap, if you open it, there's like raw carbon fiber on the inside. Just a cool knick-knack from Murcielago. The windshield's hilariously big. It's got a single wide wiper, which I think is funny. The headlights are also hilariously big and expensive, and I hope not to break them. Wheels and tires I find curious because on this car, it's got, the fronts are nothing special. They're actually hilariously skinny. I think they're 9s for how big the rears are. The rears are 13 inches wide. And finding tires is fun, but having a 13-inch wide rear wheel is just hilarious to me. All the Corvettes you probably can't see that are around me all have 12, maybe 12.5 inch rear wheels. The mirrors on this car stick out ridiculously long. And so if there's one thing you're always watching for when you're driving, especially backing up, unfortunately, you've got to watch for, mirrors clipping stuff. It's got these massive air intakes, which are funny insofar as they exist, and they're for, one side's for the oil cooler, I think, the other I forget what it's for, but washing the car and having to reach into the cavities is just funny. So Murcielago means bat in Spanish, and these are called the bat wings on the car, and they actually go up and down, and I was convinced for a bit they were broken, but actually the car raises and lowers them based on ambient temperature outside. So if it's too cold, it won't raise them. If it's too hot, I forget, it may or may not raise them. I know that it's also speed rated, so if you're going over a certain speed, it won't raise them, and maybe even under, who knows. So the point is, it's like the rare treat when they pop open and you notice it, you're like, oh no, they're alive, hooray. Again, motor in the back, and this is a first gen, so the motor compartment is covered by essentially the hood, right? But the later ones had a glass hood in the rear, which is just a cool addition. So again, this car's got a V12, a 6.2 liter V12, naturally aspirated, and it put down 580 horsepower, which is awesome. I mean, for 2002, it was one of the fastest cars out there and the most powerful. Just to compare with some Corvettes, I'm familiar with Corvettes. The C6 Z06 has got a 7-liter engine, so it's a 7.0. And it put out, 505 at the crank. So, this car, obviously more pistons, smaller displacement, but was putting down some good power in general. And even the supercharged ZR1 put out 640 on a 6.2-liter motor, the same size as this in terms of displacement, and only 60 horsepower more with a blower on top. So again, for the time, this car was putting down some good power. The car is four-wheel drive also, so that's a rarity among the cars that I have that aren't trucks. And it had a roughly 70-30 split in terms of power distribution on how it put it down. What's funny on this car is the weight. You would think with all the carbon fiber that it would be a lightweight car, but actually it's on the heavier side. So my Cadillac CTS-V, I think, comes in at 4,200 pounds. This is over 4,000 pounds, which is crazy heavy if you think about it. All the carbon fiber, and you've got 4,000 pounds of car. A C6 Z06 weighs just over 3,000 pounds. So it's like that car versus this, which we should do sometime, to be honest. You've got 1,000 pounds of weight differential, which is crazy if you think about it. So a couple things on the production of this car. They made just over 4,000, I think 4,066 Murcielagos. But what's interesting is they made them over a 10-year span. And so if you compare this to like a C6 ZR1 that they also made about 4,000 of, the ZR1 was made over a 4-year span. So they were making these, roughly 400 a year, again, handmade, versus the ZR1 on the production line. But what's funny about the handmade bit is I always thought like, oh, handmade is better. When you get a home cooked meal, that's always better than going out to a restaurant. But handmade as it pertains to cars, I would argue is worse. So much of this car is inconsistent on the inside in terms of the actual fitment of things and the fit. And you'd like to think it was better. Granted, I'm not knocking it. It's a piece of art, which is a nice way to say it was handmade and it ain't perfect, but it's still cool. But handmade doesn't always mean better. So getting in this car is interesting, and I typically let anybody who wants to sit in it. I'm a big believer in share this kind of thing with as many people as you can. But I see so many people after I tell them, watch your head, just smash their head as they get in. And I'll be honest, I learned from experience, I smashed my head more than a dozen times getting into this thing. So it's one of those cars that you don't think about, like, hey, getting into a car is simple, but this one's different. Getting out is equally different. And if you've been to the gym and your legs are sore, getting out of this thing's a huge pain in the butt. One of those little things you don't think about before you get a scissor door or a super low car in general. Beyond that, the car is actually spacious. It's got a lot of room, and I've taken it, we've driven for an hour or two at a time on the freeway, and it's very comfortable. You can hang out with your foot up and your hand on your knee, and it works just fine. It's got good air conditioning. It's got good heating. It's got not many other amenities. It's got a lot of buttons, and things are in odd spots. For instance, the seat belts are on the wrong side than most cars, right? I guess you'd call it the right side, depending. And people always get in and reach over to their left shoulder or right shoulder for that seat belt, and it's never there. Additionally, you probably can't see it, but I've got my e-brake is between me and the door, which is weird. And obviously they had to do it because of reasons, right? Where else would you put it, I guess? It's got no other spot that could go in here because the seat is so snug against the center console. And it's interesting too, because when you activate the e-brake, you would think, well, it's up and activated, and then it's there, but actually you just push it back down and it's still activated, which is curious. And then to deactivate it, you got to pull it back up and then winch it back down. Just one of those things that's weird. The shifter sits high, but it's cool. It's the stock ball, and it's hilariously mechanical. So as you shift through the gears, it feels like a machine, and the clanking just sounds cool. It's one of those things where it's not super performant, at least for me, my shifting level, but it's a cool experience nonetheless. Another weird thing is you've got in the middle your window controls, which again confuse folks. They look on the door, and there's not much on the door, to be honest. You've got window controls here. You've got mirror controls, which is kind of funny. The gas cap opener, your hazards, and then you've got other things that you probably can't see, and that's the raise the bat wings. And that one's funny to me because I don't know when you'd ever use it beyond like, hey, I want to look cool and raise the bat wings and hit the button. And the second you let the button go, they come back down anyway. So it's like this ephemeral button that doesn't last for much. You've then got traction control. You've got your front lift system, which is actually a cool addition for these cars because they are so low, and your mirror control. So very little is on the doors. And what most people don't see either is how you close the doors. And my son asked me the first time in, like, how do I close the door? Because it's not clear. There is no strap, there is no obvious pull, and there's no markings. And you actually reach up and take the armrest and just pull it down. And that gets you your door closed. And it actually works out amazingly simply. They got it well balanced, and it fits like it should. And then opening it, same thing. You pull this, and you actually use this piece, or at least I do, to elbow up and raise the door, and then push it all the way. And then getting out, like I said, is fun. So I'll get out so you can see. It's worth talking about storage in these cars. I've compared, this one to a ZR1 in terms of power. Unfortunately, in terms of storage, it's literally no competition. The Corvette has got a glove box. The Corvette has got a center console that's semi-useful. This one has got literally an inch deep center console that fits some packs of gum and a pair of sunglasses, and you gotta fit the sunglasses just right or you'll smush them. And there's not much else that pertains to storage in the car. Behind me, I believe, is some sort of glove box, or maybe it's behind the passenger seat, but literally it's behind the seat, so it's useless in terms of storing actual stuff. So I put my registration and insurance paperwork in the middle in case I am pulled over. I don't have to get out of the car and pull the seat forward and so on. Also interesting is this bit here, and I believe it's suspension stiffness. It's got 4 settings, but I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm assuming 4 is stiffer and 1 is less. It's got an auto, which I assume changes based on conditions. What those are, I have no idea. But it's one of those things obviously I thought was important enough to add. I've driven with it in almost every setting, and I'll be honest, I can't tell a huge difference, but I'm an old man, so who knows. One more bit of interesting info about exotics in general, especially older ones, is Italian cars are known for having what's called sticky buttons, and that is the buttons themselves become degraded over time and get sticky, where if you touch them, they actually feel tacky. And I thought there was a problem with the car, and after looking online and finding that you could buy complete sets of buttons after the fact, I plan on fixing that. But it's odd that they get this sticky, almost residue film to them, even though the car sits, enclosed and is never in the sun much. Just weird. So like I said, the air conditioning and heat in this car work really well. What's funny about it is I thought it was hilarious that they have this little door with the Lamborghini logo on it to remind you of the car's importance, that you have to push up to reach those controls. And for some reason, the radio is fine here, but you got to push that up to get to the controls. It's all in Celsius, which is fine, but it's the most simplistic, actually it works well, but it's the most simplistic temperature control that you could find. But again, it's not meant to be the most comfortable of cars, but it works. I think this car's best angle, honestly, is looking at it from behind. It's got a hilariously wide stance from behind, and it just looks mean. It looks pancaked almost. And driving behind it, when my wife drives, and I'm in another car, it just makes me like the car all over again. The wing, though, sells me. It really does. To this day, again, I don't care that it's not an SV. This is the SV wing, but this is not. This is a Gen 1. And I still like it. To this day, I think it's the coolest addition to the car. The nose is different too on this car. It's got the SV-ish nose, but the wing is what sells it. It's got the LP640 exhaust look-alike too. So these cars, as in the Gen 1 Murcielago from Lamborghini, came with dual exhaust pipes out the back here. And the LP640 switched to this like single-looking manifold exit, and the owner before me did the SV kit and changed the exhaust outlet to be the single outlet, which I think suits the car. It looks stock-ish, given that the LP640s had them on there. I want to talk about this for a second, and that's my tag. I just renewed tags yesterday, actually, to be able to drive this for this year. And in Michigan, your tag price is based on the original purchase price of the car. And unfortunately, this car used to be super expensive. It's still expensive, but it's depreciated at this point. And these tags cost me $1,215 every single year. And I bought them, I didn't buy them last year because of COVID, and I wasn't sure, I couldn't get into the Secretary of State. But I bought them 2 years ago, and it was also $1,215. So I don't know if in our state it goes down ever, or if it's perpetually $1,215 until you hit historical, at which point they go to 35 bucks for 10 years, something like that. Point is, it's one of those things you don't think about that irritates you long after you buy the car and love the car. It's the gift that keeps on giving here in Michigan. So one of the coolest parts on this car that isn't the interior, or the exterior for that matter, is the engine bay. It's just a cool setup in the engine bay. It's got carbon fiber literally on all sides, on the left and the right and in the middle. And again, for a 2002 car, this much carbon fiber was just gratuitous. What I also like about the engine itself, one, the valve covers that say Lamborghini are great, and it's got quad throttle bodies. And that's about all I gotta say. The fact that it's got 4 throttle bodies on a 6.2 liter V12 is hilarious to me. Knowing that my 1,300 horsepower ZR1's got a 108 millimeter throttle body, and this has got 4. It's Lamborghini. And it was built to be, the most outrageous of the exotics, and to that, they did a great job. There are some mysteries too that I don't know about this car. I haven't spent a ton of time investing in knowing it all. That said, I did buy a manual for this car because I thought it was very important to have the manual with the car, and apparently it's one of those things that doesn't often come with these cars because they're valuable, and I got to learn how valuable they are. So I talked to a dealership which got me a manual at the price of 250 bucks. So hooray for my inch-thick $250 manual. And one of those things I don't understand in this car to this day, and you will tell me what it is, I'm sure very quickly, is this piece right here. It's this black bit that sits right in front of the headlight, and it manually pops up. I don't know that it's automatic, or I can just pull it up. I have no idea. And maybe it's for a squirter, maybe it's to reach the bolts, maybe. I have no idea, to be honest, and it's a mystery to this day. So someone comment and let me know what the heck it is. I've got one more quick story to share. This car honestly wouldn't have been possible without Rob Dom's original videos on his Diablo when he first got it. And I can't remember how long those videos are. It's been easily 5 or 6 years, but I watched those videos a bunch at the time, and it inspired me to look at the Lamborghini again. It was always one of those things as a kid that I didn't think was ever going to be able to be afforded by me. And after watching his videos, it gave me the idea that it'd be something that I could do. And what's funny is we're in Michigan, he's from Michigan, and my kids and I were going one June down to Ohio to pick up an eBay purchase, and we're coming back, and I figured we'd stop by Rob Dom and his brother's business in Monroe, Michigan. And I remember pulling into the driveway or the parking lot and mentioning it to my kids, like, hey, we're gonna stop by and see a YouTuber, and they were absolutely mortified. And they said, dude, you can't do that. You just can't stop by and see a YouTuber. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can. And so knocked on the door of the business, and Kevin Dom, Rob's brother, opened the door and had a great conversation with him. Rob wasn't there, but he pointed us Rob's way, went and visited him, and talked through some of my aspirations to get a Murcielago, and he shared his Diablo experience. And again, he deserves kudos for opening up that door for me to even think about this car being something that was in my wheelhouse. One piece of information that he shared too during his Diablo videos, I didn't take to heart until I actually got a Lamborghini, and that was you have to budget time with these cars when you're going places, because you can drive the baddest Corvette on the planet and nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. You drive in this thing, a 19, 20-year-old car, drive it out to anywhere, you are the center of attention, and everybody wants to check it out, to stop, to say hello, to look at the inside, to sit in it, to hear it rev. And these are all what these cars are for. It's meant to be shared. It's meant to be looked at. It's meant to be, talked about, and otherwise, it's meant to bring people together. And so to that, too, I thank Rob for allowing me to have the experiences that he warned me about and that I didn't fully appreciate. So with that, thanks for watching. I appreciate the support. Thanks for watching to the end, you guys. If you want more car content from ddxauto, by all means, like, subscribe, and all that BS. And catch us on Instagram too at ddxauto.